Imagine this: a lone cowboy riding through the scorching Arizona desert stumbles upon a giant Apache warrior caught in a deadly bear trap. One courageous act changes everything, and the very next day, the chief of the tribe makes a demand that could change his life forever. This is a story of bravery, honor, and unexpected love in the untamed Wild West. Let's dive straight into this incredible tale. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe, share, and comment below so you never miss an adventure from the Wild West. The desert stretched endlessly, a sea of dust and jagged rocks, shimmering in the unforgiving sun as if the horizon itself were a mirage. Every step Caleb Ryder took seemed to sink slightly into the scorched earth, Dusty's hooves stirring clouds of powdery sand behind them. He had ridden hard all day, following a trail of rumors and whispered warnings about a bear that had been terrorizing nearby ranches. The townsfolk spoke of it in hushed tones, their eyes darting to the mountains as if the shadow of the creature itself might leap down at any moment. Caleb wasn't one to be easily frightened. He had spent years navigating the lawless stretches of Arizona, where danger wasn't always the creature of legend, but the man hiding behind a rock, ready to draw first. Yet as he entered the narrow canyon that sliced through the Dragoon Mountains like a scar, a strange stillness settled over the air, pressing against his chest in a way that made him glance nervously over his shoulder. Dusty snorted, pawing at the ground, and Caleb knew this was more than the usual desert quiet. Something was wrong. The canyon walls loomed high on either side, jagged and menacing, shadows pooling like ink across the dirt floor. Caleb dismounted cautiously, eyes scanning the rocky terrain. His instincts, honed over countless days on the frontier, told him to move slowly, quietly, and to expect the unexpected. Then he noticed it, a drag mark, deep and deliberate, cutting through the dust toward a clump of mesquite bushes. The mark was fresh, and the way it tore into the soil suggested it had been made by something or someone immense. Heart pounding, Caleb crouched and followed the trail, aware that each step could be his last. He forced himself to breathe slowly, the desert air hot in his lungs, until a groan shattered the silence, a sound of pain so raw it made him instinctively sprint toward it. There, caught in the merciless grip of a massive steel bear trap, lay a man of immense stature. Even through the dimming light, Caleb could see the broad shoulders, the powerful arms, and the face etched with determination and pain. Blood pooled around the man's leg, soaking the dirt as he struggled in vain against the iron jaws that bit into his flesh. In his hand, he gripped a spear, lifting it with strength despite the agony that twisted his features. The sheer presence of him was awe-inspiring, an Apache warrior, colossal and unyielding, yet trapped like prey. Caleb froze momentarily, calculating his next move. One wrong step could turn this into a fatal encounter. Apache were fiercely protective of their land, and intruding without caution often ended with death. Still, Caleb could not leave a man to perish slowly, not when survival depended on courage, quick thinking, and a willingness to act when it mattered most. The warrior's eyes locked onto Caleb, burning with equal measures of fury and defiance. "Stay back, white man," he barked, his voice strained but commanding, a warning etched into every syllable. Caleb raised his hands, speaking with calm authority, his voice steady in the tense air. "I'm not here to fight. Looks like you got yourself in a hell of a bind." The man's jaw tightened, veins pulsing in his temple. "I do not need help from you," he growled. "You do need help," Caleb countered softly, crouching slightly to show he meant no threat. "That trap isn't letting go on its own, and you can't fight it." For a long, silent moment, the warrior glared at him, pride warring with the raw pain coursing through his body. Then, finally, a grudging acknowledgement passed over his features. "Do it, but trick me and I will kill you." Caleb nodded. "Fair enough," he said, stepping forward with careful precision. His hands found a sturdy branch, and he wedged it into the steel jaws of the trap, leveraging all his weight and strength against the cruel mechanism. Metal groaned under the strain, and the warrior winced sharply as pain shot through his leg. Caleb ignored the burn in his arms, forcing the trap open slowly until it finally yielded with a sharp clatter against the rocks. The warrior's leg was free, but blood gushed from the wound in a vivid, frightening red. "You're lucky," Caleb said evenly, wiping sweat from his brow. "Another hour and you might have bled out." The Apache's eyes narrowed, both in pain and begrudging respect. "Luck has nothing to do with it, only strength," he said, his voice raw but steady. "Sometimes strength is knowing when to accept help," Caleb replied, stepping back to give him space. For a moment, the warrior just stared at him, studying every line of his face as if measuring the man's worth. Then he allowed a short, almost imperceptible nod. "I am Takoda," he said, "friend to everyone." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Fitting name." Takoda attempted to rise, but his leg buckled beneath him. Caleb acted instinctively, catching his massive frame and supporting him as he eased him to the side. The sheer weight of the warrior was staggering, but Caleb had learned long ago that hesitation could be more dangerous than strength. He carefully guided Takoda to his horse, Dusty shifting nervously under the sudden demand, and with effort lifted the wounded man onto the saddle. They moved slowly, Caleb walking beside the horse to ensure the Apache warrior did not fall again. The journey out of the canyon was tense, every rustle of brush or distant howl sharpening Caleb's senses. Night was settling in, and with it, the shadows of the mountains became more pronounced, almost alive. By the time they reached the edge of the Apache camp, the sky was a deep indigo, and the first flickers of firelight danced between the cottonwoods. Warriors emerged from the darkness, bows drawn, eyes scanning every movement with a mixture of suspicion and alarm. Caleb stopped immediately, hands raised, signaling peace. Takoda shouted something in his language, and the warriors froze, recognition dawning on their faces. Quickly, they rushed forward to assist their comrade, lifting him from the horse with care and efficiency that spoke of practiced precision. Caleb remained where he stood, uncertain how the chief would respond to a stranger entering their camp at night with a giant warrior over his shoulder. Then the elder appeared, moving with a quiet authority that commanded attention without need for words. His eyes, sharp and discerning, fixed on Caleb, and for a long moment. The cowboy felt as though every decision, every mile ridden, had led to this confrontation. "You brought my son home," the chief said finally, his voice carrying over the murmuring camp. "Why?" Caleb squared his shoulders, meeting the chief's gaze without faltering. "Because it was the right thing to do," he answered. The chief studied him silently, weighing his words. "A strange answer for a white man," he said. "Most would have left him to die." "I ain't most," Caleb replied simply. The chief's expression softened just slightly, the first trace of acknowledgement forming on his face. "Come, share our fire, share our food." Caleb followed, senses alert as the camp opened before him, a world so different yet fascinating. Children watched with wide eyes, women moved gracefully among the fires, and warriors whispered among themselves, curious but respectful. Takoda's wound was tended immediately, the healer working efficiently and silently while the warrior endured with stoic strength. Caleb watched, a mixture of relief and admiration in his chest, and felt the unspoken acknowledgement of respect from Takoda, the bond between them strengthened by trust forged in crisis. By the time the meal was shared, and the firelight danced on faces both curious and welcoming, Caleb realized the desert night had changed everything. The man he had saved, the tribe he had entered, and the path he had chosen were now irrevocably entwined. One act of courage, one moment of choice, and the life of a giant Apache warrior had led him into a world of tradition, honor, and something that whispered of destiny. And as Caleb settled near the fire, listening to the low hum of conversation, the crackle of flames, and the distant cry of a coyote, he had no idea that the dawn would bring a challenge unlike any he had faced in the vast, untamed wilderness. Dawn arrived with a gentle glow over the Dragoon Mountains, painting the desert in gold and rose. The camp was already alive with movement, the rustle of blankets, the soft chatter of children, and the rhythmic pounding of a blacksmith's shaping tools. Caleb stirred from his sleep, the cool morning air brushing against his skin. He had slept lightly, the events of the previous night echoing in his mind, the massive warrior he had saved, the wary eyes of the tribe, and the piercing gaze of Chief Nawatosa. He had thought the danger was over, that delivering Takoda safely to his people would end his night of trials. But as he stretched and rose to his feet, he sensed that this morning would demand more than courage. It would demand a choice he hadn't anticipated. Caleb was still fastening his belt when Takoda appeared, walking with surprising strength despite his injured leg. "You slept well?" the warrior asked, his voice carrying a teasing edge. "As well as a man can sleep on a desert floor," Caleb replied, "but I reckon the day will be full, and I'd best be ready." Takoda's eyes twinkled with mischief and gratitude. "You saved my life. Today you must prove yourself again, not to me, but to my father." Caleb's chest tightened. He had expected the chief to be stern, perhaps even cautious, but he hadn't imagined what was coming next. Before he could ask, Chief Nawatosa emerged from the circle of tents, moving with the steady authority of a man who had led his people through countless hardships. The chief's gaze swept over Caleb, landing finally on his face with unblinking intensity. "Caleb Ryder," the chief said, his voice calm but commanding, "you have saved my son from death. Among my people, such an act carries weight. The life of a warrior cannot be repaid with mere words or coins." Caleb swallowed hard, feeling the heat of expectation rising in his chest. "I only did what I thought was right," he said. The chief nodded slowly. "That is why the debt must be honored. For a life saved demands repayment in the ways of our people. I offer you my daughter as your wife." The words hit Caleb like a sudden desert storm. He blinked, startled. "Your daughter," he stammered. I don't understand." "She is my child. You saved my son's life. You are worthy. Among our tribe, this is the way of honor," the chief explained, his tone leaving no room for argument. Caleb felt the eyes of the entire camp on him. The women had paused in their work, children stopped their play, and Takoda stood nearby, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Caleb looked around, searching for an escape, for a way to respond without offending the chief, without dishonoring the trust he had built. And then, from behind the chief, she appeared, Yana. She was beautiful, in a way that commanded respect rather than mere attention. Long dark hair fell over her shoulders, and her eyes held a fire that made Caleb's heart skip. She stood with poise, yet there was softness in her expression, a quiet invitation hidden in the depth of her gaze. Caleb realized almost immediately that the choice before him was not just a matter of tradition, it was about connection, about understanding, and about the courage to follow a heart he hadn't known he possessed. Yana's voice was calm yet firm. "Do you accept me because you are forced, or because you wish it?" Caleb hesitated, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition pressing against his chest. I don't know," he admitted honestly. "I've never been asked to choose in such a way. I've never met someone whose life mattered so much that it changed mine overnight." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained silent, allowing the moment to breathe. Yana stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Then choose for yourself, not for tradition, not for honor. Choose because your heart tells you to." Caleb felt a rush of emotion he had not expected. His life as a wandering cowboy had been defined by independence, by the rhythm of the trail, by the solitude of open plains. Yet, in Hyana's eyes, he saw the possibility of belonging, of partnership, of a future anchored not in dust and distance, but in love and loyalty. "I want to know you," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "I want to see if the man who saved your brother's life is worthy of being part of your world. And if you are willing, I want to walk this path with you, not because I must, but because I choose it." Jana's lips curved into a small, approving smile. "Then we will see each other," she said. "We will learn, and if our hearts agree, the bond will follow naturally." Takoda clapped him on the shoulder with surprising force. "Brother," he shouted, "you've passed the first test. Now comes the journey together." The following days were filled with lessons Caleb had never anticipated. He hunted with Takoda, learning the ways of the land, the quiet rhythm of tracking and survival, the language of signs in wind and sand. He watched Ayana work with her people, creating pottery, weaving blankets, and painting sacred symbols. They shared conversations, shy glances, and laughter that echoed across the desert like wind through canyon walls. Every moment strengthened a bond that neither of them fully understood yet, a connection forged from trust, respect, and the thrill of discovery. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in amber and violet, Caleb walked beside Ayana along the riverbank. The water reflected the fiery sky, shimmering in gentle waves. "You are different," she said quietly. "Different good or different bad?" Caleb asked, half smiling, trying to mask the flutter in his chest. "Different good," she replied. "You see people for who they are, not for their tribe or station. You listen, you understand, and you act with courage." Caleb's chest tightened. "You're different too," he said, "stronger than I could ever imagine and wiser than the land itself." For a long moment, they walked in silence, letting the river and the whispering wind speak. Then Ayana stopped, turning to face him fully. "If I choose you, will you stay? Will you make this your home?" Caleb hesitated, thinking of the open plains, the freedom he had always known. But he also thought of the fire in Ayana's eyes, the gratitude and pride of Takoda, and the respect of Chief Nawatosa. And in that hesitation, he realized that freedom without connection was emptiness. "I will stay," he said finally, "not because I must, but because I want to, because I've found something I've never known, something worth more than the trail, the wind, or the endless horizon. I've found a home." Yana's smile was radiant, and she took his hand. "Then we begin together." The tribe celebrated, the fires burning brighter, the music echoing through the cottonwoods. Caleb had entered the canyon a lone cowboy, uncertain and wary, but he emerged into a world of family, honor, and love. He had faced danger, made a choice, and discovered a bond that transcended the divide between their worlds. In the days and months that followed, Caleb and Ayana's bond deepened. He learned the ways of her people, and she shared the traditions and wisdom that had shaped her life. Takoda became not just a friend, but a brother in every sense, and Chief Nawatosa's respect for Caleb grew as he proved himself again and again, not just with courage, but with heart. And so the cowboy who had saved a giant Apache warrior became more than a wanderer. He became part of a legacy, a story whispered around fires for generations, of courage, honor, and a love born not from obligation, but from choice, respect, and the wild, untamed beauty of the desert that had brought them together. By the time the desert sun set once more, Caleb Ryder had found his path, not on a trail leading into uncertainty, but along a river of trust, under the watchful eyes of a tribe, and hand in hand with the woman who had changed everything. The legend endured, that a single act of bravery could reshape destinies, forge bonds stronger than the harshest wilderness, and teach even the most solitary cowboy the true meaning of family and love.